Hello again. In this video I want to talk about the perfect cadence. Now in music, a cadence is a sequence of chords that close off a piece of music or a section of music. There's quite a few different recognised cadences, and I'll probably talk about those in some other videos in future, looking at the harmonic structure of them. But the one I want to look at today is the perfect cadence. It's quite interesting in terms of the harmonic structure of it. A perfect cadence is something, if we look at it in a major key, is where you go from the 5 chord to the 1 chord. Most importantly though, if we look at it in terms of 7th chord, if we go from the dominant 7th chord on the 5th degree up to the tonic chord. So in the key of C major, we'd be going from a G7 chord to C major. You can hear how that would be particularly effective in closing off a piece of music, because that dominant 7th chord sounds quite unresolved. The reason for that is because it's got what's called a tritone interval, an interval of 6 semitones between the major 3rd and the flat 7th degree. Now that interval of a diminished 5th and augmented 4th, 6 semitones in classically in music, that's quite sort of frowned on, quite an abhorrent interval, because it sounds so unresolved. Traditionally in classical music it's been called the devil's interval because of the way that it sounds. I mean, as blues players we're quite used to hearing that flat 5th because it occurs in the minor pentatonic flat 5. Works quite well, but in the context of this dominant 7th chord, that interval there gives the chord its unresolved nature, and it wants to go somewhere. It needs to move on. You can't really rest on that chord. And in the perfect cadence, what we're doing is we're going from that 5 dominant 7th chord up to the tonic chord. And you can hear how that just closes off really nicely. There's a couple of reasons for why that works so well. Most importantly, we're getting rid of that tritone interval, that 6 semitone interval that's in the dominant 7th chord, and there's not a 6 semitone interval between any of the notes in the tonic chord, the C major and the 1 chord. But the other reason it works quite well is 2 of the notes in that dominant 7th chord only move by 1 semitone between that chord and that chord. So the movement is quite natural. We haven't got any really big jumps. So what we've got in the dominant 7th chord, and say playing in the key of C major, we've got a G, a B, a D and an F, and then the chord of the 1 chord of C major, we've got a C, an E and a G. So you can see here how the notes are moving from one chord to another. Yeah, so a very subtle movement. The B from the G7 chord moving up 1 semitone to a C, and the F in the G major chord moving down a semitone to an E in the C major chord. So finishes off quite nicely. Now a variation we can do with the perfect cadence, and this is something you can do in music, is anywhere where you get a dominant 7th chord, you can substitute a dominant 7th type chord with the root note that is a flat 5th above the root note of the chord that you're playing. I'll show you what I mean. So in the key of C major, we're playing a G7 chord here. Now the flat 5th degree of G is D flat. So what we could play is a D flat dominant 7th chord. And that's called chord substitution, where we're taking a chord that's not in the key and playing it in place of a chord that is in the key. And there's certain sort of rules or guidelines, if you like, about what chord substitutions work well and in what context. So we've got some commonality between the notes of the G7 chord and the notes of the D flat 7 chord. Most interestingly, I think that third degree of G7 is the flat 7 degree of D flat 7. As I say, that's a sort of recognised chord substitution, taking the dominant 7th chord that's a flat, where the root note's a flat 5th higher than the root of the chord that you would normally be playing. So if we hear that being used as the, within, if you like, the context of a perfect cadence, we go from a D flat 7 down to C major. And again, that works well to close off the piece, because we're going from a very unresolved chord in the 7th chord down to the tonic. I'll show you a way that we can, quite a common sort of chord progression that you come across is a 2 minor 7 to 5 7 to 1. So this chord progression here. So in the key of C major, we've got a D minor 7 to a G7 to C major. You can hear how that chord progression moves quite nicely, because you're going up an interval of perfect fourth from the D minor 7 root note to the root of the G7. And moving up an interval of a perfect fourth is quite a natural way to lead the ear. And then we're moving up an interval of a perfect fourth from the root of the G7 to the C major chord. And as I said before, with the perfect cadence, we're getting rid of that dominant 7th sound with the 6th semitone interval in it to a nice resolved tonic chord, the 1 chord of the key. Now let's think about that using the chord substitution, where instead of playing the G7 chord, we're going to be playing the D flat 7 chord. So we'll go from D minor 7 to D flat 7 to C major. So again, that works really nicely, quite smooth, because you've got a very smooth movement of the bass note of the chord, where we're going from D to D flat to C. And it just closes the piece off quite nicely. So that's the perfect cadence, the traditional way of playing it, 7 chord to 1 chord, and with a flat 5 substitution on the 7th chord. Both work quite well. So think about that when you're writing your own chord progressions. You know, what you want to get a natural way to finish a progression off. You want to lead the ear of the listener towards some sort of resolution. That perfect cadence is a nice way to do it, because of the unresolved chord and the degree of resolution you get when you land on the 1 chord. Okay, so that's something to think about. Have fun, keep practicing, and I'll see you in another video soon. Bye for now.